This presentation covers the updates to the artistic component for the 2018 Rhythmic Gymnastics Code of Points in the individual program. In the text of the Code of Points, in red, it's possible to read the additional information that was added to the code, much of which was taken from the judges' courses presentations to give both the coaches and the judges more explanations for what to be including in the composition, what to be working on in the composition, and what the judges should be looking for, so that the artistic aspect of rhythmic gymnastics is not lost in the number of elements. The main feature of rhythmic gymnastics that's different from all other disciplines is that all 4 exercises are performed to different music. So in each composition, the movements, the choice of movements should be answering this question: why did you choose this specific music instead of another piece of music? Because when the movements don't demonstrate something related to the music, every exercise will look the same. This is a composition from the mid-1980s, and this composition also has 9 throws. Compositions in 2018 have sometimes 9 throws. But in all of the movements throughout this exercise, even if you can't see the gymnast's face clearly, it's possible to understand what style of music was chosen and what type of movements go with that music.
Stars Marina Lobach. We're going to see a completely different side of this gymnast. This routine's very playful. She does incredible things with the clubs. Tosses are superior difficulties. The toss caught underneath her leg.
During the judges' courses, when all the judges watched compositions from the 80s and the early 90s, where the artistic component was heavily emphasized and the relationship with music was really fine-tuned, some judges asked, but this isn't rhythmic gymnastics of today. Part of the reason for choosing this example is that there are a lot of throws of the apparatus. Just as in 2018, there are a lot of throws of the apparatus. Small, medium, and large, the clubs in this exercise are in constant motion. And criteria that's used today in 2018 is used in this exercise. Cascade, catches outside the visual field, throws from under the leg. One of the R elements is extremely difficult with the cascade and the 2 forward rolls. But this exercise respects all of the artistic components in the 2018 Code of Points. There is an idea because the rock and roll theme of music is woven not just in an isolated 8 seconds. It's woven everywhere. Under the throws, in the pauses, in the connections and transitions. There's a rock and roll theme to the movements. With the rhythm, because all of the accents are emphasized and marked, the connections are smooth and logical, transitioning from one to the next for the most part. There's a visible dynamic change at least 2 times. And there's variety, there's a lot of movement. And in this case, we can look to all decades of rhythmic gymnastics for not only inspiration, but for guidance on how to create a composition that has a theme or idea so that it does not become monotonous to watch the World Championships, so that each piece of apparatus, hoop, ball, clubs, and ribbon, have different characters, not just because of the fundamentals, which are different for each element, but because the style of every single exercise presented looks different. And this is what's attractive, and this is what's exciting. In the Code of Points, 411, which says unity and character, has additional text which explains that the unity and the character refers to the theme or style of movement throughout the exercise, just like the previous example. That unifies the elements so that there is an idea to the movement that reflects the style of music. Right now, the technical committee has observed that a lot of exercises have the same movements or the same elements regardless of the particular style of music. Whatever the style of music is, has to influence and dictate the style of movement so that it's obvious why she had rock and roll. Here, we'll look at a short example in contrast to that club's exercise to look at what the character of the movement might be. This is a series of elements because there is no real theme of movement which explains for the judge and more importantly for the public why this gymnast has this beautiful, slower type of music, because in between each difficulty and during each difficulty there really are no signals about what she feels or what this music is about or what kind of movement it inspires. This is just balance, then throw, then body difficulty, then AD, etc. This is not exclusive to this gymnast. This is not just 1 or 2 countries. This is a current problem in rhythmic gymnastics 2018 that the entire world, with the support of the technical committee, needs to pay more attention to make sure that rhythmic gymnastics remains the beautiful, elegant, dynamic sport that it is, that the music has a justification for being there, that there's a difference between the hoop routine and the ball routine, first and foremost because of the music, because the style of movement in every exercise should be different. And from one exercise to the next, with this relationship of elements, it's hard to understand why this music versus another music. This is the unity of the composition in the code of points. So where specifically should the judge be looking for the character of the movement? Because the judge has to make an objective analysis in something that has a subjective quality, like the theme and the style. The question is, where can she or he identify any theme or style? The code of points lists various examples. Of course, those aren't the only examples, but various examples to give the judge something concrete to look at so that she can make her evaluation of the unity, and another judge can be looking in the same places and have the same identification of, yes, there were thematic movements and I understand why this music, or no, I don't. The style, the code says, the style and type of the movements should reflect the character or idea of the composition. For example, but not limited to, arm movements. This specific movement of the arm specifically matched the actual dynamic change in the music. It matched the theme of those few notes and made the public and the judges appreciate this particular one moment of the music. It goes from one theme to a slower theme, is elegant, is a dynamic change, and the gymnast movement emphasizes it. This gymnast has a completely different style of music, but her arm movements in the preparation for the difficulty say something about this particular music. Instead of the previous example with the ribbon, which was just a preparation and a difficulty, without some characteristic arm movement, more or less, that related to that music. Other places to look: the connecting steps, the actual steps which join one difficulty to another difficulty. So this gymnast has two difficulties joined by those connecting steps, which are very stylized and which seem specifically choreographed for that place of the music, and not generic two steps that doesn't really matter this particular music, the previous music, or the future music. Again, this is two difficulties. One is an apparatus difficulty, and then connecting steps which link the gymnast into the body difficulty, which is a leap. This is not a dance steps in between because it's too short, but it's stylized steps transitioning her and moving her into the body difficulty. And those steps very much have a theme that relates to the music. Also, you can look at the body waves. Even body waves now are a required element artistically. And the body waves can have different styles depending on the music. This is a softer, slower body wave performed on the floor, which connects to that particular music. These are upper body movements, like mini waves, completely different style of music, but that match well to the theme. The code also talks about specific apparatus elements that emphasize the rhythm and the character. This is a type of moment that creates an effect because the music has a specific ding, and the timing of the rebound from her foot perfectly matches that musical note and creates the effect of the music. The character of the movement should be expressed during the dance steps, which have a style specifically related to the music and are not simply walking, skipping, or running to the beat. Those steps clearly look like they were choreographed, and they have a very particular style for that music. And again, actually in this presentation, with the exception of the first exercise from the 1980s, all of these examples except for one were taken from 2017. And many gymnasts have changed their compositions in 2018. Some might be improved, but some have actually taken out style, and therefore these examples are not particular to a gymnast or to a country by any means. And they're actually not the same compositions this year, but these are good examples of some of the artistic components so the judges can understand what specifically everyone can be looking for in the dance steps. These are dance steps that are primarily walking or some minor foot movements to the beat, but don't have a very defined character. For example, could those steps with the clubs be in a different exercise? Probably. So the idea, the character is not very strong in those dance steps. And actually right now in 2018, a lot of dance steps do not look like they're 8 seconds because of the number of elements within them, or they don't have true character for the music. The technical committee would really like for judges and coaches to pay more attention to this in preparation for the World Championships, because the dance steps are supposed to highlight the theme of the exercise with the character of movement. Another place to look for character in the connecting elements between or during the difficulties. For example, preparations for body difficulties, as we saw with the clubs, the arm movement before the pivot, or preparation for throws, as in here. A lot of gymnasts do prepare the ribbon to make a particular kind of throw. At least in this example, these arm movements with some upper body emphasis speak to the specific style of the music and create some thematic link so that she's not simply standing there pulling the ribbon together. particular gymnast is able to do good pivots, and therefore she has enough time during the attitude pivot to use the arms to create a thematic effect. That's during a body difficulty. As we saw earlier in the connecting steps between difficulties, some gymnasts just move from one into another, even without several steps. They just move sort of one into the other, but there is some kind of character to that transition.
Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played.
Two body difficulties with a connecting transition between the two that is very thematic, has a lot of character, and specific to that music. Alleluia. Body difficulty, and then she transitions into the preparation for the AD with some style and some movements, again related to the particular music, and not simply penché, put the ribbon on her foot, and go backwards. Under the throws. Very elegant arm movements, so she's not simply throwing and standing under the apparatus, also creating amplitude and very nicely matched with that musical moment. Very specified arm movements under the throw. Not standard by any means, but specific to the type of music that is here. During the catches.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big man someday. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace, kicking your can all over the place.
Two good moments here, the claps underneath the throw and the peace sign on the catch of the next small throw match the style of the music, which is "We Will Rock You." Those movements wouldn't match the music Alleluia, obviously, but contributes to the fact that there's an idea just when the gymnast is throwing the apparatus, because right now they're throwing the apparatus a lot. And just throwing the apparatus 9 times in the exercise with no idea on the throw, under the flight, during the catch, just becomes monotonous throwing and catching of the apparatus. Technically speaking, this wave of the body as she's catching the apparatus is not perfectly executed, but the idea of catching it into this wave is nice because it matches the style of music. During rotational elements, and there are a lot of rotational elements right now because there are a lot of R elements, and all the rotations have to be different, but even the rotations themselves or the arm movements under the throw during the rotational elements could be stylized for the particular type of music. This is a dramatic moment, and the arms have dramatic movement coming down, up, and then close to the body. This is just sort of a transitional element, but has tons of character. And it's not just moving from one element to the next. And the judge has to appreciate in her evaluation the difference between compositions with this type of stylized movements and those without. Changes of level, changing level, keeping a character of the movement, not just up and down. This is a very big issue in 2018 because the gymnasts have so many R elements, they have so many ADs that go up and down, and simply going up and down, right and left, back and forth, without any character of movement, simply becomes up and down, back and forth, monotony, and a loss of art. In the transition from being down to up during these steps, the gymnast is sort of smoothly able to go from down to up with some reason, with some idea, with some arm and upper body movement, and not just stand up, sit down. Because when 6 days of competition, 4 different apparatus has only going up and down without any real theme, it's hard to distinguish one exercise from another, one gymnast from another. And these are penalties. And the penalties are increased in unity so that the judge can take it, so that the coach can understand. Maybe the artistic score is lower because the judge cannot recognize any true character of movement. And style of the actual apparatus elements. It's a highly stylized, it's 1.5 seconds, but it makes some true connection to the music. It's a preparation for a throw, but that wouldn't work with other music. Okay, so we'll look now for a review of those places which we just went through during difficulties under the throw, during the catch, in preparation, in transition, during rotational elements, during changes of level. We'll look at those concrete places and see how many examples you can see. This period of time is approximately 1/3 of the exercise. So during 1/3 of the exercise, if you can count only perhaps 2 clear moments where you would know why the gymnast chose this music, then that means the majority of the exercise you cannot. And the code of points specifically explains what to do in the case that you cannot identify any character of movement in the majority of exercise. This rule is not exclusive to any one particular gymnast. This is for serious consideration for all levels, for all gymnasts, senior, junior, every country needs to continue to focus on this to make sure that rhythmic gymnastics remains rhythmic gymnastics in its absolute best sense. As you can see, and everybody knows from judging this year, the penalties are increased for the guiding idea 0-1, 0-3, 0-5, and 0-7. 0-7, a penalty of 0-7, which is close to a point, means that neither the dance steps, nor the connections have any defined character. The steps are just walking or just elements, and the exercise is just element after element after element, the judge takes 0.7 and the judge has to take 0.7 because the coaches specifically asked for increased penalties in the area of idea of the composition, because everybody, coaches and judges, can see that not all compositions have the same artistic impact. For a penalty of 0.5, it means that the defined character is only present in the dance steps. It's only present for 8 seconds of the exercise. The rest is just difficulty after difficulty without character in the places which we just reviewed. The penalty is 0.5. And then between 0.3 and 0.1, 0.3 means there is a character in the steps and there is character of movement between some of the connecting elements. 0.1, character is present in the dance steps, visible character, not just elements and walking. And there's some theme to the movements between the difficulties under the throws, etc. in the majority. The majority, not all, but the majority. So the penalty is only 0.1. A penalty of 0 would mean the exercise is completely unified in that the theme is everywhere from beginning to end. Everywhere. Here's one example to look very specifically at a certain specified style of music and the actual dance steps and all the connecting places which we have reviewed previously in this presentation. In this exercise, these dance steps are specifically made for this music. This music has a specific style, and the dance steps have a very defined, visible style. The movements between and during and connecting the elements stay within that style. The judge is less aware of her going up and down, her changing of directions and levels, because it's interesting. It's stylized. You're much less aware of all the transitions because it has a theme. This is an exercise from 2018, this year, and it's extremely well unified. The character is present in the majority of the connecting elements, if not almost all. There is absolutely no way to take a penalty for this exercise of 0-3. By contrast, it's absolutely not possible to take a penalty only of 0-1 for compositions which don't have such a defined style. Completely independent of the difficulty level, because some athletes prioritize difficulty over the artistic component, which is okay. This code of points allows athletes and coaches to prioritize their strengths. In the specific artistic component, this has to be differentiated in terms of the idea. We'll check the same here, the dance steps and all of the connecting elements between transitions. This exercise has a dance steps combination, which is fantastic in the sense that there's character, it matches the rhythm, it matches the style, it's well executed. The dance steps meet the expectations of the code of points very well. The rest of the connections between the difficulties The rest of the difficulties are joined with perhaps one really visible moment of some theme and one or two glances. But the primary character is only in the dance steps. Possibly in one or two other transitions between difficulties, but hard to say that it's even some of them because it's maybe one or two. And therefore, this is how the judge follows the code of points to evaluate unity. 4.1.2 in the code of points, the second artistic component is connections. Connections are the way the elements are joined together, smoothly and logically. Also remember that a technical fault that interrupts the exercise is not penalized as a connection. If it was smooth and logical and she simply has a technical fault, that's a technical fault and possibly a loss of rhythm. The penalty is only if something is not smooth and logical or prolonged or abrupt, because all of those moments make the composition disjointed. And all of these components work together in terms of unity and connections. That's the relationship. When it's smoothly joined, logically joined, it's possible to emphasize the idea. When it's abrupt, up, down, left, right, for no reason, everything becomes choppy, and it's harder and harder to identify the idea, the story, the relationship to the music. The Code of Points says the use of different levels and directions of the body, movements, and directions and planes of the apparatus should be linked together with a clear purpose. Connections between movements which disrupt the unity of the composition are penalized each time. For example, but not limited to, transitions between movements which are illogical or abrupt, including changes in directions or levels between difficulties. In this example, the gymnast throws from standing, performs the rotational elements on the floor, and simply stands up from the floor in order to perform the next body difficulty. There's no real reason or clear idea linking her being on the floor and her preparing for the next body difficulty. In this case, either better to stay on the floor and transition up into this next body difficulty more smoothly and logically, or with a much greater emphasis on some thematic movements, moving her from down to up. The transition between the first element and this next balance is not smooth and logical. Perhaps, in the small throw from her foot outside the visual field, the trajectory was not what she planned, and therefore she laid down to turn around to move into this. Perhaps it's not even the intention. And this is important because right now, with so many different types of apparatus difficulties and R elements, sometimes the trajectories of the apparatus do not go as intended, but the judge doesn't know that. She can only evaluate what she does. So the gymnast will move from one direction to the next abruptly or illogically, lying down on the floor only to stand back up to do a balance. These are connection faults. This is a moment in the exercise where, again, the idea is lost. So that's due to the connection between the two elements. So this is each time is 0, 1. Connections between movements which disrupt the unity, exactly what we just spoke about, are penalized each time. For example, but not limited to, prolonged preparatory movements before difficulties, like walking preparation steps which don't support the idea or character. This is a body difficulty into another body difficulty with walking between the two that don't really support the music or the idea, except the speed happens to be fast, as is the rhythm. This is a body difficulty and then walking steps into the balance. But the reason that the connection is related to the unity is this moment could be done with any music. That jump and those steps and that balance don't really speak to this particular music, unless every beat was emphasized with some dramatic motion. And in this case, we return to the original point of discussion, which is that each exercise's music must be chosen for a reason, and that style must be emphasized from the beginning to the end through the unity, the connections, the rhythm, the dynamic change. The music guides the story. And each story should be different so that the championships is exciting and not monotonous, so the apparatus looks different and not the same. Again, each time the connection is like this, walking steps which are not stylized to the type of music, the connection would be 0, 1 each time, because prolonged preparatory movements before difficulties. That's a prolonged preparation, just walking into it. Unless those steps were highly stylized, as we saw in previous examples. Because then there's a reason for the steps. Rhythm. Rhythm follows the same system as connections, and loss of rhythm or missing accents is penalized each time, 0, 1. The movements of the body as well as the apparatus should correlate precisely with the accents and the phrases. Both the body and the apparatus movements should emphasize the tempo or the pace. This gymnast is performing dance steps, and they're well choreographed to the rhythm. She's marking all of the accents. Right now, with ADs and Rs and body difficulties that have to be placed in the composition, the coach needs to place them to match the accents. When the accents are going and going and the gymnast is doing something without emphasizing the accents, the judge takes a penalty of 0, 1 each time. We can look at this example to check when movements are visibly emphasized before or after accents. If there's a clear accent in the music and it just is passed through. If the gymnast is sort of behind the phrase. When the tempo changes and the gymnast is in the middle of slower movements and she can't reflect the change in speed. Those are all the situations where rhythm is penalized. It's not just that the judge takes an automatic 2 or 4 or 6. She needs to remark when this happens. And if this doesn't happen and all the accents are precise, then she doesn't take the penalty. This gymnast has several moments where she's able to emphasize the accents very well. She has several arm movements, one large throw and jump, which matches the accents well. However, she has several technical faults which disrupt her relationship to the rhythm. So the technical faults do impact the rhythm because we can see she gets behind or she gets off depending on having to take an additional step on a preparation or to adjust for an imprecision in the plane or direction of the hoop, which puts her off the main accents and she can't then emphasize them. Or as you could see after, I believe, the first R element, the change of level from going down to up, it was just standing up and really not emphasizing any accent or real character, and therefore she was disconnected for the rhythm. Again, the reason why the relationship between all of these components is important, even though they are independently evaluated. The reason why the connection from down to up is important is because when it's on the rhythm, when it has some style, it gives some idea, some story. But when it's simply trying to stand up and then it's just standing up off the music, it's a completely different picture, and there has to be a difference in the artistic scores, regardless of the technical level. So those are places where you can see she's on, and then a lot of places where she's off. There's an example that is very logically and smoothly connected, especially with the clubs together. There's like a reason, there's a transition, it's smooth, it's not abrupt. Those are smooth connections. That whole sequence is performed with the rhythm, the accents well, and there's a even theme and style as she exits the movement. In this sequence, again, the elements are well connected and go smoothly one to the next, even this final transition when she starts the preparation for the body difficulty and there's some club movement. It's smooth, it's logical. She's also with the rhythm on the throw. She's on the rhythm as each sort of new phase of the rhythm is matching the movements. The only perhaps weaker part of this small segment is that the theme or the style of the movement between all of these elements is less clear. She moves from one difficulty to the next very well, connected well. She's on the rhythm, but the actual theme of the movements is less pronounced. So the judge, this is a very small segment, that's why the judge has 3 different categories to evaluate, because all of those work together to create the impression. In this sequence, it's harder to understand why this music. Dynamic change. The gymnast shows dynamic change by contrast in the energy, power, speed, and intensity of her movements. For lacking identifiable dynamic change, the gymnast could create her own by changing the speed, style, or intensity. Sometimes the gymnast does that when the music increases intensity and she throws and performs very large movements, or she softens them or slows them. An exercise where the energy, power, speed, and intensity are monotonous without contrast or change in speed, style, or intensity lacks dynamic change or lacks dynamism and is penalized 0-3. There are a lot of things happening in the exercises, but this again goes to the original concept of why this music. In that first club routine, we saw 2 very visible dynamic changes, which emphasize the character of that rock and roll routine. Let's look for dynamic change here. The music has a dynamic change, very visible, very audible. You can hear it, and you can see it when she changes the style and the speed of her movements. Several dynamic changes in the music. You can hear them and you can see them because of her changes in her style of her movements and in the speed. Absolutely independent of the technical level of the gymnast, from bottom to top and top to bottom. This is what the judge looks for dynamic change, because as you can see, the theme here, the theme and style is evident. So even if her technical level isn't the strongest, it doesn't influence whether or not she has a dynamic change. It's impossible for there to be any standardization of any of these penalties. And in fact, her club routine could be different from her ball routine. So the same penalty doesn't apply to the same gymnast across all 4. The judge has to see what she does on that specific day. And both of those examples have identifiable dynamic changes. Body expression should be a union of strength, beauty, and elegance, ample participation of the segments, including the face, supple plastic movements which convey character, communicate feeling or response with the facial expression, emphasize accents, create subtlety and finesse, and create amplitude. The whole reason to have all the different styles of music is that there's an infinite amount of styles that the gymnast could express through her face and her body. There's no one right way to have body expression, but it needs to match the music and her response to it. This gymnast does have participation of her head, her shoulders, trunk, hands, arms. Hard to see the face on the video, but understand that she's engaging, at least her face is engaging. She has supple movements, which have character and are communicating a response and are emphasizing the accents with those arm movements and creating finesse with those segments. The absence of those, which we just described, are penalized as insufficient participation of the segments, including face, either 0-1 or 0-3. 0-1 is insufficient participation of both the body or the face, and 0-3, segmentary rigid movements in the entire exercise. There are differences in the body expression, and there's 2 different penalties or no penalty. New, a minimum of 2 different body waves, partial or full. Partial meaning the arms or half of the body should be part of the composition to increase expressivity and create elegant movements. All segments involved in the wave should participate sequentially, as in a wave. This is a valid partial wave with the arm because it moves in a sequential motion. Both of the waves could be partial, both could be full, 1 or 1, but it has to be visible to be valid. More different styles of waves, partial or full. That initial wave there. Full body wave there. Regardless of the technical level, these gymnasts have 2 slightly different technical levels, but both of them have valid different styles of waves because they're visible and they're performed sequentially. The absence of the 2 waves, partial or full, penalized as insufficient participation of the body, 0-2. This is a separate box. So a gymnast might have the 2 waves, so she has no penalty for waves, but otherwise limited body expression. So she would have no penalty for the waves, but she could have 0-1 or 0-3 for the segments. Or she may have sufficient participation, so she has no penalty, but she actually misses 2 visible waves, 2 sequential contractions of the arms, the upper body, partial or full. So she could have no penalty for actual body expression, but she could miss technically 2 waves. She could have both or neither. And variety. Please remember that there's 3 different 0-2 penalties for insufficient use of the floor area. Insufficient variety in the directions and trajectories, moving back and forth in the same part. Some exercises that the technical committee has seen are performed predominantly on one line of the carpet. Often it's because the trajectories are imprecise and the gymnast adjusts and it ends up adjusting the intended floor pattern. But the judge is not concerned with what she intends, only what she does. Movements performed in one place on the floor area for a long time. Sometimes an issue when the gymnast has several stationary static body difficulties in a row. 2 or 3 balances or balance to pivot to balance. She could end up being in the same spot for a long time. And if the entire floor area is not used. Sometimes the first and third penalty go together, but not in all cases. It really depends how much of the floor she uses. For example, gymnast was in the center of the floor for a long period of time, several elements in a row, this would be an instance of 0-2. Insufficient variety in the use of levels and modalities of traveling. Modality means how the gymnast moves. Is she just running through the exercise, or does it look like she's walking through the exercise? This penalty is 0-2 if she just walks or runs element to element to element. Apparatus variety. Handling, throws, and catches. This is something that all gymnasts of all levels will need to focus on more precisely before the World Championships, because a lot of gymnasts have almost all the same type of throw. And in some cases, for example with the clubs, catching all of the throws with one club, trapping the other club, or only rotation of the hoop around its axis everywhere on all the elements. So that's apparatus variety, as well as now checking for missing fundamental apparatus elements, a 0-3 for each missing. Do note that for the asymmetric movements of the clubs can be performed with the held clubs or the clubs in flight, as long as the definition is respected. All of these components together create the artistic score. The judge needs to pay attention to each box independently. And the penalties are increased. They are more severe. So just as the gymnast is able to perform what she's capable of in the difficulty, the creation of the composition with the guide as the music is more strongly evaluated according to these components. Thank you and good luck.